Chapter 451, The Battle in the New Immortal World. Even though Master couldn't calculate the Sishop's background, the black-robed Taoist snapped back to his senses after a long pause. They came prepared and knew that the Sishop owner wouldn't be an ordinary person, since even the Heavenly Insight Scroll couldn't find out the background of the Sishop. But they were still shocked when they heard that he was going up into the immortal world to battle with a demon lord. It is a bit far-fetched, right? Since when is going to the immortal world as simple as drinking water or having a meal? It must be noted that no one had ascended to heaven in a long time. They found seats and sat down in doubt. The moment that they sat down, the big white deer went to the counter and came back with a dark purple round bowl dangling in its mouth. The newcomers stared at the big screen intently. This place looks indeed like the immortal world. On the big screen, the immortal essence and auspicious clouds floated around, and colorful lights flashed in the grand and beautiful palaces. It indeed looked celestial. While they watched, a special fragrance suddenly floated into their noses. They sniffed subconsciously, and Wang Zi turned his eyes toward the source of the scent. Keep a calm and clear mind. Watch carefully, the white-haired old man said. Yes, master. Wang Zi immediately sat straight and continued watching. Less than 10 seconds later, a yellow-clothed young master and a burly man in a shirt walked over and sat down beside the big white deer. Little Bell, your master is not here today? They each had a bowl of instant noodles in their hands. Ugh, what's the scent? The black-robed Taoist of Heavenly Academy sniffed involuntarily. Finding that the sour fragrance was even stronger, he glanced over subconsciously and saw that the two men and one deer each had a purple round bowl in their hands, and the intense fragrance. Gulp. Unconsciously, he swallowed his saliva. Concentrate and ignore all distractions. The old man beside him reminded him. Yes, master. With a shiver, the black-robed Taoist immediately turned his head back and concentrated his attention on the big screen. At this moment, the two people on the big screen hadn't attacked yet, but their presences swept over the sky and the ground like tsunamis. Neither of them moved. Meanwhile, several cultivators walked over from the counter, each holding a purple round bowl and a paper cup with a big straw in it. They sat down on the other side of the three newcomers. The rich sour fragrance and intense milk fragrance floated into their noses alternatively. Then, a lowly came over with 3 girls, each holding a bowl of instant noodles, and they sat down beside the big white deer. Xuanhuan walked in with some guards. With more people coming into the lounge area, the intense fragrances filled the whole space. Wang Zi and the black-robed Taoist glanced over again subconsciously. Ahem. A slight cough came from the old man. With a shiver, the two guys looked back and watched the big screen with straight postures. Then, they heard the old voice say, "You two, go and ask them what they are eating. We will take some of those." In disbelief, they turned their heads and saw the white-haired old man taking in a deep breath of the fragrance, looking intoxicated. The two men were speechless. Wow! The battle is beginning. With a bowl of instant noodles in his hands, the black-robed Taoist stared at the screen with bright eyes. Right now, Mr. Fang controlled Jingtian and launched an attack before his rival did, flying across the sky as a light beam. When his sword collided with the 2 blades in Chonglu's hands, the horrifying force spread out like a tsunami. With explosive earth-shaking noises, the immortal palaces around them collapsed in the blink of an eye. The first round of attacks between an immortal and a demon was so explosive that all the audience felt dizzy with thrills. Awesome! When can I be as powerful as this? The black-robed Taoist of the Heavenly Academy froze with the bowl of instant noodles in his hands. He said shakily, "Only immortals in heaven can unleash such power." He is a real immortal. Is this what the junior sisters and brothers have been talking about every day? While swallowing a mouthful of instant noodles, Wang Zi said in a daze. After their weapons separated, chilly lights flashed in the ocean of clouds like shooting stars while they exchanged dozens of attacks in the blink of an eye. The sword energy and devil energy spread out in all directions, and they left deep cracks in the surrounding clouds and palaces. Excited, the players flooded the screen with bullet comments. They had been thrilled when they watched the great battle between Fei Peng and Chonglu in the opening animation of the game, and their blood boiled. Now, they realized that they could control the main character to fight the final battle with this unkillable demonic god. Only a battle of this scale could be called a battle, and it was worth it for the viewers to feel blood boil over it. Fighting with an ultimate master was the dream of each master. Even the ordinary cultivators without great talents also wished that they could reach the summit and have a thrilling battle. Now, the opponent was the unkillable lord of the demon world, Chonglu. He could control most people's life, death, age, and sickness, and he had mastered spatial powers. Since Jingtian was technically still a human, Chonglu wouldn't unleash his full power in this battle. Instead, he only used a force within the range of human achievement. FCK. Mr. Fang is fighting so fiercely? On the big screen, Fang Qi didn't show any disadvantage after controlling Jingtian to battle with Chonglu for dozens of attacks. Then, his left hand turned, and a small bronze wine cup appeared in his palm. Light flashed on the small wine cup as if a tremendous amount of spiritual energy had been injected in it, and he tossed it out. With a huge noise, the wine cup exploded in front of Chonglu, and a great surge of flames that could cover heaven and earth instantly swallowed him. Nation-destroying silver bullet wave? Someone exclaimed. The attack didn't end here. On the screen, Jingtian withdrew his sword and cast a spell. After Fei Peng reincarnated as Jingtian, he knew more than just sword techniques. Before the aftermath of the explosion disappeared from where Chonglu was standing, flames of extremely high temperature rose around Chonglu, shaking the sky and the earth. Shaking star and moving earth, sky burning flame. Even Chonglu can't escape from these attacks unscathed. He is merciless. Watching a battle of such scale, all the audience felt a force surging through their veins. Then, they flooded the screen with bullet comments. However, a chilly light appeared in the depths of the thick smoke in the ocean of flames at this moment. Meanwhile, a streak of a trigram spiritual light flashed around Mr. Fang. Mr. Fang was intact, and the chilly light turned around, instantly shooting toward Chonglu. What's that? The audience watched the scene in horror, wondering why it seemed like Chonglu attacked himself. Damn awesome. He used Smoky Moon Godly Mirror. This was a consumable type super spiritual treasure that Fang Qi obtained in the immortal world. The godly force attached to the mirror could bounce back the opponent's attack even though this attack came from Chonglu who, after all, only unleashed a force within a human's capabilities. Chapter 452. Mr. Fang is unrivaled. On the big screen, Chonglu's two blades suddenly tilted at a weird angle as they slashed toward Fang Qi. Fang Qi got the perfect timing with the use of Smoky Moon Godly Mirror. If he was a tiny bit earlier, Chonglu wouldn't have attacked since this demon lord wasn't a fool. If he was a tiny bit later, the result would have been fatal to him. After his training with the use of the Royale Guard style in Devil May Cry 3, Fang Qi could perfectly control the timing at these critical moments and use ultimate techniques and items. They passed each other in a flash, and people saw a faint bloody scratch on Chonglu's cheek in the next moment. Chonglu was wounded first? The shop owner is unrivaled. Awesome. He wounded Chonglu first in this battle. What is the Smoky Moon Godly Mirror? What did the shop owner do? The black-robed Taoist, Wang Zi, and the old man hadn't played The Legend of the Sword and Fairy 3. They just saw a flash of Tai Kai spiritual light around Jingtian, and then an injury appeared on Chonglu's face after the two rivals passed each other. How come the shop owner is so powerful? The black-robed Taoist was shocked, wondering how someone could be so powerful that he could battle with a demon lord. At this moment, someone exclaimed, "Look! What is the shop owner eating?" When he passed Chonglu and got a moment to breathe, Mr. Fang took the opportunity to stuff an elixir pill into his mouth. Almost instantly, Jingtian's various properties such as speed and cultivation strength rocketed. It looks like a godly fortune for openings pill? In the Zhuhui City shop, the sharp-eyed Nalan Mingzhu recognized the elixir. I saw only 2 such pills and obtained them in the immortal world at great costs. Song King Feng sent several bullet comments. The shop owner is taking drugs? Ruining. Boss is shameless. Mr. Fang ignored them. After taking the elixir pill, his strength skyrocketed, and his extremely sharp sword energies dashed toward Chonglu. That demon lord is being suppressed. Wang Zi said in astonishment, the shop owner's strength is so great. Yeah, the black-robed Taoist nodded repeatedly. You too, watch it carefully. Old Academy Master Gu Tingyan had a different opinion. This young man looks strong, but his strength mainly comes from the elixir pill, and he blocked his opponent's prior attack with a spiritual treasure. In contrast, this demon lord fights without using any outside assistance, and he is very steady. Master, you mean Wang Zi watched carefully and found that his master was right. The shop owner's great strength is temporary. When the effects of the elixir pill pass, he will be at a disadvantage and could even be defeated. Gu Tingyan said with a nod, something like that. Really? Hearing his words, the people around them scratched their heads and continued to watch the live stream. The two rivals flew to the top of an immortal palace, and their sword and dual blades release many lightning bolts, almost instantly cutting the immortal palace beneath them into pieces. Mr. Fang slashed out the demon-suppressing sword with his right hand, and his left hand. "You guys, look at the shop owner's left hand." Mr. Fang splashed out a cloud of white mist silently with his left hand. "Pooh." The audience almost spat out whatever they were drinking or eating. "He is even using sleep-inducing drugs?" On the big screen, Chong Lu froze for a second, and Jingtian hacked down his sword mercilessly. Bone-melting pulp? Not an ordinary sleep-inducing drug, it was so powerful that even demons couldn't block its effects. Since Chong Lu was in his human form instead of his demon form, he felt dizzy for a moment. The moment that he circulated his cultivation strength and dispersed this poisonous energy, the demon-suppressing sword was almost upon him. He not only took drugs himself, but he drugged Chong Lu as well. The audience was stupefied. Then, they saw Mr. Fang tossing out a green bead with his left hand. The bead had a creepy green color, looking like the green eye of a poisonous viper. Poison bead? This wasn't the end. Then, Mr. Fang dug out a bead that was emitting a pure and holy light. Saint spiritual bead? His right hand drew a circle with the demon-suppressing sword, and many spiritual swords appeared in the sky behind Jingtian, forming a horrifying curtain of swords. Innumerable swords scroll. Jingtian doesn't know this technique, right? Mr. Fang knows it. Someone exclaimed. Mr. Fang used the sword control technique and close-range sword technique with the demon-suppressing sword with his right hand and threw out all kinds of spiritual treasures with his left hand. The audience was at a loss for words while they watched the battle. Soon, Chong Lu was forced into a disadvantage. Then, he yelled in fury, and his demon energy suddenly surged. He turned from his human form to his demon form. Although he still used a force within the range of human's limit, the power that he unleashed in his demon form was way greater than his human form. Tremendous, destructive demon energy gathered before his chest while the surrounding energy of nature swarmed toward him like waves of an ocean. The horrifying energy was compressed in front of his chest. The dark demon energy mingled with the energy of nature, forming a terrifying ball of energy with a white core and a purple surface. Then, the energy ball shot forward like a cannonball. The horrifying energy almost destroyed everything on its way. It was Mind Wave, an ultimate technique that Chong Lu only used after changing into his demon form. The white burning energy ball exploded, and it instantly turned into many destructive white light beams while sweeping across the whole space. The powerful energy waves expanded and spread out while rippling, turning everything that they met into dust. The audience watched the scene in terror, finally having a glimpse of Demon Lord Chong Lu's great strength at this moment. Even Jingtian with his current cultivation strength might not be able to block this attack, not to mention mortals. At this moment, Mr. Fang took out a pale purple crystal from his pocket. It was emitting radiant lights. Buzz! With a strange vibration, an invisible force appeared in the area, and it hacked open the destructive waves, keeping Jingtian intact. Fantasy Realm Crystal was a mysterious treasure not belonging to any of the 6 realms and could block any spiritual spells in a short period once it was activated. TL note: Buddhist cosmology typically identifies 6 realms of rebirth and existence: gods, immortal, demigods, humans, animals, hungry ghosts, and hells. It could only be used once, but Fang Qi used it at the perfect time. While controlling Jingtian to fly forward with the sword control technique, Fang Qi took out another godly fortune for openings pill. Then, he took out another elixir pill and swallowed both. Zoo Dragon Internal Core? The audience howled and thought, how many treasures do you have in your pockets? After taking the pills, Fang Qi suddenly condensed a strange barrier around his body. Meanwhile, Jingtian, under Mr. Fang's control, unleashed a streak of horrifying sword spirits. Chong Lu attacked Jingtian with his dual blades. Resonant, bell-like noises swept all over the space. Mr. Fang was intact, but Fang Qi's sword already pierced Chong Lu's chest. The audience fell silent. On the big screen, Chong Lu's expression was as dark as the bottom of a pot that had been burned by fire. You win. The audience saw the wounded Chong Lu, and bullet comments flooded the screen. Condolence to Big Brother Chong Lu. Chong Lu, you're a good guy. Mr. Fang, you win. Despicable and shameless old demon Fang. Mr. Fang said in disdain, do you want Sister Long Kui to come back to life or not? We do. We do. We do. Hurry up. Show us how Long Kui comes back to life. The bullet comments immediately changed tones. They had instantly forgotten about Chong Lu's little wound. Gu Tingyan's old face was dark. This shop owner, don't ever mess with him. If a powerful master had pride, one could still use this to their advantage and potentially win the battle. But to people like this guy, he was invincible. Chapter 453, Buddhistic Players, Just Cover Your Head. Chonglu had captured Xuanhuan and Long Kui right after Jingtian's battle with the evil sword immortal, which was the cause of the final battle with Chonglu. Due to the short time between these two battles, the players didn't have enough time to increase their levels to 99 like in the original version of the game. Due to the limited preparation time, the players were allowed to use all kinds of methods to rescue the hostages and obtain the perfect ending. If the players wanted to battle Chonglu without using any tricks, they could follow another path and obtain another ending. After Xuanhuan sacrificed herself to the sword furnace and died, Jingtian, who was heartbroken with sorrow, immersed himself in martial Tao and finally reached the no-sword realm. After he recovered most of his sword techniques from his previous life, he finally had the power to battle Chonglu. Is there no one who is going to praise my excellent plays? After winning the battle using all kinds of treasures and elixir pills, Mr. Fang didn't feel a trace of shame. Do you think it's easy to sneak attack a demon lord? If it was the original version of the game, Mr. Fang was confident that he could just barely defeat Chonglu by using the level 1 demon suppressing sword. But now, there weren't that many mechanics that could be used in the virtual reality version, which meant that Fang Qi couldn't defeat this demon lord using the fancy moves as he did in Devil May Cry 3. After all, Dante had gained tremendous strength at the end of the Devil May Cry 3, and Mr. Fang had synchronized with Dante for a long time in the game cultivation room. In contrast, Jingtian's current strength in The Legend of the Sword and Fairy 3 was way lower than that of Chonglu's. However, people didn't care about this. After all, they were more interested in the fact that Long Kui, who had jumped into the sword furnace, could finally be resurrected. For Chonglu, his small wound was no big deal. After bringing Long Kui back to life, he even separated Red Kui from Blue Kui, who had been one person with two personalities. In this way, Long Kui became two girls. The audience watched Jingtian return to his life as the shop owner of Zinan Pawn Shop. He put away and sealed his sword and lived a happy and free life. Zhu Jian became the mistress of the shop. Blue Kui was in charge of antique appraisals, and Red Kui's job was to scare customers. They lived happily as a family. Beginning from the battle in the new immortal world and ending with a battle in the new immortal world, all the reincarnations came to a happy ending. While the ending of The Legend of Sword and Fairy 1 was a sharp blade cutting into the players' hearts when they thought of it many years later, the ending of The Legend of Sword and Fairy 3 was a cup of fragrant tea where the taste would linger with them for a long time. On the big screen, many bullet comments expressed the audience's feelings. Ruining, I'm touched. Nalan Mingzhu, compared with The Legend of Sword and Fairy 1, I like this one better. Lan Yan, I like both. Su Tianji, I like both as well. Not only the girls such as Zhu Zixin and Dong Qingli, but the guys such as Liu Yangxi and Song Qingfeng were so happy that they danced cheerfully. Long live Big Brother Chonglu. I didn't know that Sister Long Kui could be resurrected. Excellent. I knew it. Inside the Yuanyang City shop, Zongwu gulped down Coke and slammed his hand on his thigh heartily, and he said while laughing, "This girl Long Kui doesn't look like someone who would die so easily. She looks lucky." Since the young people from the Heavenly Academy were of similar age as the characters in the game, they were supposed to share the feelings of the characters who had experienced so many ups and downs until the happy ending was reached. In the real world, these young people had just begun their journey, setting sail on their ships on the ocean that was called life. However, most of them remained silent at this moment. So good. One of the young people sent this short bullet comment. It contained only 2 words but held a deeper meaning. Meanwhile, the newcomers, Wang Zi, the black-robed Taoist, and old Academy Master Gu Tinjiu, exchanged a look of bafflement, wondering about the story leading to the final battle. Who can tell us the story? It's Senior Gu. Many people had been watching the live stream intently and didn't see him. When Zongwu and the others saw him and came over to greet him, the others were startled. After all, not just anyone could have the opportunity to see him. Otherwise, the people would have swarmed to the Heavenly Academy to ask him to calculate some answers for them, and the threshold of the main gate of the Heavenly Academy would have been destroyed. Gu Tingyan immediately stood up to return the greetings. "I'm here for a leisure outing. I'm surprised to see so many of you here." Wei Zongwu and the others smiled in embarrassment. "Senior Gu, did you just say that you want to know the story of The Legend of the Sword and Fairy 3? The Legend of the Sword and Fairy 3 story? Gu Tingyan was puzzled. What story? Gu Tingyan pointed at the big screen. I want to know how the shop owner could battle the demon lord and resurrect people. Who the heck is the shop owner? He's so powerful that he can even battle a demon lord. Xuanhuan's face twitched. This was a big misunderstanding. Immediately, he explained the game to the newcomers and took them to the computers to experience the Legend of the Sword and Fairy 3 inches person. 3 minutes later, it only took 3 minutes for them to fall in love with this new game. Green light lit up in their eyes while they asked, "Do you mean that we can also battle Demon Lord Chonglu when we play to the end of the game?" It was awesome enough to watch someone else battle, and now they realized that they could do the same and battle this powerful master. Although it was only a game, the experience was almost the same as in the real world. Even Gu Tingyan, an old man who was enjoying the last few years of his life, wished that he could pass the game and experience the battle with the Demon Lord. Ugh! The Xuanhu was embarrassed, thinking that they had a long way to go before they could reach the end, and they should take it slow. However, Mr. Fang's battle with Chuang gave them some inspiration. So long as they had the right strategies, accumulated enough experience and skills, and obtained precious treasures in the game, they also had a chance to pass the game even if their cultivation strengths were not high. In Zhuhai City, people like Nalan Mingzhu, Song Qingfeng, and Su Tianji who had played The Legend of the Sword and Fairy 1 with proficiency had no difficulty playing The Legend of the Sword and Fairy 3. Some of them had reached the second half of the game. As for the cultivators in Yuanyang City, most of them were still playing the first half of the game, reaching the middle point. As for the new players such as Gu Tingyan, Wang Zi, and the black-robed Taoist Zumo, they were still being reprimanded by Miss Tang. "This girl is so unruly. How dare she beat me?" Zumo jumped up in rage. In the game, Jing Tian, who hadn't learned any martial arts, received another beating before he could attempt to fight back. He turned his head. "Master, how did you pass this part?" Gu Tingyi looked calm. As a Buddhistic player, since he couldn't fight back, he just covered his head and received the beating calmly. TL note: Buddhistic is a popular internet slang in China. It is used to describe people who are calm and reserved at all time. It seemed like they had a long way to go before they could challenge Chonglu. Chapter 454, The Post-Bar Forum is unlocked. By now, Mr. Fang had finished his first round with The Legend of the Sword and Fairy 3 and achieved the happy ending. Since he was playing the game for the second time, his progress was behind most of the other players as he started from the beginning. The players who played the game for the second time after clearing the stage and the players returning to the beginning of the game before clearing the stage would still obtain tremendous benefits by killing monsters and leveling up again. Of course, in the later stages of the game, they could gain more than experience and cultivation strength. They would obtain greater benefits such as powerful techniques and the main character's comprehension and inspiration about cultivation. All these benefits were better than simple cultivation strength. However, many people wanted to clear the stage with better performances and achieve an ending that they liked. Others enjoyed the feelings of growing from weak to strong and achieving breakthroughs in battles. Therefore, a large portion of the players played this game again. In The Legend of the Sword and Fairy 1, the players could still do tasks after passing the game. For example, Li Xiao could still finish the task that Sword Saint assigned to him and become the master of the Shu Mountain faction. After that, the players could continue the game by managing the affairs in the faction. However, in the system version of The Legend of the Sword and Fairy 3, it was different. After the perfect ending, Jing Tian put away and sealed his sword. Although the players could still experience the happy life in Xinan Pawn Shop, some players who sought after thrills would find it more fun to play the game again from the very beginning. Despite the high degree of freedom in the system version of the game, it couldn't let the players continue playing the game after the end of The Legend of the Sword and Fairy 3 until the side chapter of The Legend of the Sword and Fairy 3, which was another game, was unlocked. Likewise, the players couldn't play for another 80 to 100 years until they enter the game of The Legend of the Sword and Fairy 1 and The Legend of the Sword and Fairy 2. Such a thing wouldn't happen. Unlike Devil May Cry, which was perfect for warriors to play, the characters in the series of The Legend of the Sword and Fairy could cultivate either sword techniques or spiritual spells. In The Legend of the Sword and Fairy 1, players could focus on the sword control technique, or they could resort to plain attacks using Tiangang Battle Key, or they could learn all the spiritual spells. In The Legend of the Sword and Fairy 3, The players could control Jingtian to cultivate spiritual spells while warriors could control him to practice sword techniques. They could even move Li Xiao's sword control technique from the Legend of the Sword and Fairy 1 to here to continue practicing. Of course, the sword control technique was Zhu Changqing's strong suit while Jingtian didn't show any great talent in this technique. Jiang Ziyu sat together with 4 others while playing the game in the internet cafe. Right now, people could see that Yubai held a demon sword and killed her way into Thunderclap Hall with the main characters without using any spiritual spells. Beside them, the big white deer was chased by disciples of Thunderclap Hall while casting the ice spell. It yelled in tears, "This game is so difficult to play. Why doesn't Jingtian have 4 legs? They will catch me soon." While it yelled, its screen turned gray. "Little Belle, you are so dumb." Jiang Ziyu glanced at the deer and said, "Watch me." Although Jiang Ziyu had lost several days of playtime due to the academy exam, her progress in the game was quite fast. By now, she had reached the part where she had to rescue Xuanhuan from the ghost realm. Right now, she was walking on Yellow Spring Road which led to hell, but she showed no fear in this gloomy place. 2 small ghosts floated toward her. On the screen, Jiang Ziyu's plays were so fast that the people watching could only see a blur. This is called kiting. On the screen, Jiang Ziyu controlled Jingtian to toss out a long-range spiritual spell. Attack while running. This is called sidestepping. When the 2 small ghosts rushed up, Jingtian calmly dodged their attacks. Then, he tossed a spiritual spell and hit a ghost that missed the target. This is called prediction. After a series of plays, the few small ghosts vanished with screams before they could touch his clothes. The other players glanced over and yelled, "Amazing! How did you do that?" The big white deer said, "Princess Ziyu, you're awesome. Can you teach me?" Jiang Ziyu snickered. While the players were in different stages in the game, with some close to the end while others were at the beginning, it didn't stop them from discussing the game. "I tried the lightning style and fire style spiritual spells today. Just what happened after I increased its level to level 3? A voice came from outside the shop before the people in the shop could see this person through the windows. The voice came from Tang Yu, and he was waving a folding fan made of black jade. Beside him was Wang Zi, a white-clothed handsome young man who looked scholarly and elegant. He said with a chuckle, "Brother Tang, you found something new?" "More than that," Tang Yu said, "I've made that spell called Shooting Star Level 3, and my lightning style spell, Sky-Piercing Heavenly Lightning also reached level 3. Once, I used both spiritual spells at the same time by accident, and they formed a mixed spiritual spell called Lightning Igniting Burning Flames." Indeed? Wang Zi was also a cultivator who chose to focus on spiritual spells, but he chose a different direction compared to Tang Yu. He cultivated the wine style and water style spells. Can these spiritual spells really mix with each other? How powerful is the new spell? The power more than doubled. Tang Yu said proudly, "I'll show you in the game." "Excellent, excellent." Wang Zi said, "If this method proves useful, I'll buy you a bowl of instant noodles." "Ugh, look, junior sister Ziyu is here. That is, senior sister Yubai." They are all playing The Legend of Sword and Fairy 3. Jiang Ziyu was reading messages in the group chat in QQ. In the Legend of Sword and Fairy Communicate group, Jiang Ziyu asked, "Who knows how to get through Yellow Spring Road?" "I'm lost." "Lan Yan, ask your sister Mingjiu. She has all the detailed maps before the immortal world." Jiang Ziyu was surprised. "How come you guys have such things?" "Nailan Mingjiu, I paid people to scout out the areas and drew the maps. Do you want them? I'll give them to you if you call me good big sister." Jiang Ziyu, Su Tianji, Lan Yan, "We also have the mixing conditions for several mixed spiritual spells." Song Qingfeng didn't hesitate. "Good big sister, please give me one copy of that." Watching from behind, Tang Yu and Wang Zi were dazed. Who are they? They even have all the maps leading to the immortal world? After all, they had just begun playing the game. They have detailed maps? Instantly, several people turned their heads to this direction. It must be noted that there were many places like Thunderclap Hall in The Legend of Sword and Fairy 3 to defend against invaders. These places were huge and maze-like, and the players got lost easily if they didn't pay close attention. Wu Zong asked, "Where is it?" Wang Zi replied, "It's in their group chat on QQ." Black-robed Taoist Zumo asked, "Can we join this group chat?" Meanwhile, Mr. Fang saw that the messages in the group chat on QQ jumping like crazy, and the number on the top right corner of this group chat icon soon reached 999 plus. Mr. Fang suddenly got a prompt from the system. The messages in the various group chats in QQ reached the limit several times. Post Bar Forum is now unlocked. Info note: Post Bar Forum is an internet product created by the Chinese company Baidu. Just think of it as Reddit.
Chapter 455. It's always right to follow the steps of the shopowner. Post Bar Forum. Fang Qi glanced at the screen and saw the icon. Soon, a blue square icon for the Post Bar Forum appeared on the desktop of all the computers. This was the third free basic software after QQ and the virtual item trading net. Since it was unlocked by the system, it appeared on the desktop directly. In contrast, the Matrix was a prize drawn by Fang Qi, and he could choose when to release it. For the customers in the old shops, they would understand the movie. But for the customers in the new shop, they didn't have the slightest idea about internet, and the only reason that they came to the shop was to play The Legend of the Sword and Fairy 3. Since these people had no idea, if he released The Matrix now, they wouldn't be as excited and inclined to purchase it. Therefore, Mr. Fang decided to wait for a while before releasing The Matrix. At least the new customers would have to have a basic idea about virtual reality, computers, and machines, etc. Many new players played the game by themselves and talked about it in their small circles. They knew nothing about QQ or Zone. They also didn't know that in the distant place beyond the heavenly abyss sea, another group of cultivators was also playing this game. When they encountered problems while playing the game, they only discussed about it in their small circles. However, things changed after the appearance of Post Bar Forum. At this moment, Mr. Fang created a post bar named The Legend of the Sword and Fairy 3. At this moment, Mr. Fang saw a profile photo jump in QQ. Xuanhuan, Husky's dumb cute face. How come I found another new item? Are you watching out for new items each day? Mr. Fang was exasperated. You saw it the moment it appeared. What's this for? I saw nothing when I clicked it open. Mr. Fang. However, as the owner of the shop, he was the only one who knew how to use this thing. Soon, Mr. Fang replied after a series of operations, now, enter it again. Xuanhuan entered The Legend of the Sword and Fairy 3 post bar. Sure enough, she saw 2 posts inside. Discussion: the plausibility of merging 5 elemental spiritual spells. Guide: how to obtain the Fantasy Realm Crystal. Fantasy Realm Crystal? In the Geocity shop, Xuanhuan's eyes widened as she held a cup of milk tea in her hands. She exclaimed after a moment of stupefaction. The shop owner released the method of getting the Fantasy Realm Crystal. Different from the original version, in the system version, there were very few treasures that could block spells from Chonglu. Different from the group chat, the Post Bar Forum had no restriction circles for participants, and anyone could discuss all topics regarding a game or a movie. Soon, a large group of people replied to the posts. New players asked questions in the post bar while new guides and discussion posts appeared. The Legend of the Sword and Fairy Communication Group is recruiting new members. The QQ group number is. Several days later, this post appeared in the Legend of the Sword and Fairy 3 post bar. At this moment, Mr. Fang glanced at the activation number of the Legend of Sword and Fairy 3 and found that it had surpassed 3,000. I'm going to battle Chonglu now. Nalan Mingsu posted a screenshot in the group, showing that she was on the way to the new immortal world. How come you guys are so fast? Wangxi froze when he entered the group chat. How come you're so fast? Huang Putao with the ID, Black Dragon Castellan, posted a message, I play 8 hours a day but only reached the Evil Sword Immortal. By the way, the Evil Sword Immortal is so powerful. I'll post a guide after passing. Mr. Fang, it sounds like a farewell. Song Kingfing, he is not replying. I guess the battle has begun. 1 hour later. Nalan Mingsu, Husky's pitiable face, I was beaten senseless. Jiangxi Oyu, I haven't got the yet. Song Kingfing, Brother Chonglu is so powerful. I guess I'll lose to him tomorrow too. Black-robed Taoist Zemo's profile photo was a picture of Chonglu. After all, he is the Demon Lord. While the people in the half-city shop and City shop had gotten to know each other through battles, the relationship between the new shop and the old shops was much friendlier as they were all playing The Legend of Sword and Fairy 3. There was less competition. Instead, the cultivators discussed with each other in the group chats and forums as if they were studying Tao together in a peaceful atmosphere. One day, Mr. Fang finally added a new movie on the small blackboard, The Matrix. The spiritual state's climate was even milder when compared to Jua City in the deserted sea realm. It was well into the spring. Even though Xuanhuan City was built on the top of a spiritual mountain, it wasn't cold. Meanwhile, a big demon still stayed in Half City, the coldest of the three shops. Aku. When will that damn old demon Fang take me to the new shop? Mr. Fang had no such intention at all. The disciples of the Heavenly Academy came to the shop whenever the elders didn't hold lectures. The elders of the Heavenly Academy didn't have lectures each day. For the geniuses, self-cultivation was more important since the masters only acted as guides. It was why the disciples of the Heavenly Academy had lots of free time. Some even went out for a long time to experience the world or seek adventures. Sister Lanuo, I can do it. Li Lanuo prepared instant noodles and milk tea for her good friends in school while she was preparing her own snacks. The Li family had few members left in the world, and she was the most talented one in the family, which was why Elder Li Muaya and little Xina hoped that she could put all her energy on cultivation. However, she would help them out in the shop since she came to the shop every day. Boss, how come the main item isn't The Legend of the Sword and Fairy 3? While walking past the counter, Li Lanuo saw that the first item on the small blackboard changed to a movie with the weird name The Matrix. She knew what movies were since she had watched Xu Mountain at Jiangxi Oyu's recommendation. Zongwu came to the shop whenever he had time, so it was up to how much affairs he had every day. Today, he wasn't in the shop yet, which meant that he was busy. However, people who were not busy walked into the shop. Master, be careful. Wangxi helped old Academy Master Gatinu into the shop. Gatinian had retired from the position of Academy Master long ago. Right now, during the last years of his life, his only job was teaching disciples. Wangxi's only job right now was studying the Heavenly Insight Scroll. But since his master even came here to play games, he didn't need to study at all. The master and disciple were the earliest customers in the shop almost every day. What are they doing standing around the counter? Gatinian narrowed his old eyes. Then, he heard Jiangxi Oyu asking in her crisp voice, Boss, are you going to watch The Matrix? Of course. Why not? Then, I'll watch it too. Anyway, it was always right to follow the Shopona. The Matrix? Wangxi and Gatinian exchanged a look. What's this?
Chapter 456, Tour Group sets off to The Matrix. Info note, the plain translation of The Matrix into Chinese is Hacker's Empire. Therefore, it would cause some confusion in this section. Hackers? In the Zhuhai City shop, people were bustling in the early morning. Although the shop only opened just now, it was already busy. Upon entering the shop, Li Heron froze when he saw the new movie that was offered. Others might not understand this word, but as the genius artifact master in Dajin, he clearly knew how they easily won the information war against the alliance of major forces. They had borrowed the idea and strategy from the hacker Lester in Grand Theft Auto 5. Perhaps the strategy was a bit crude and in its infancy, but it was effective against the major forces who had never imagined such a strategy before. Is this a movie featuring hackers? Li Heron was a bit curious. Although they had achieved success by using this strategy, what was the use of watching hackers? How could that be applied in the real world? Could they use the skills learned in the movie to hack into the computers in the internet cafe? It was a bit far-fetched and non-realistic. Then, he glanced at the price and found that it was quite expensive, 38 crystals. He could afford this price, but he wondered why this movie was as expensive as Shu Mountain. For the cultivators, the science technology of the ordinary people was child's play compared with the top-level spiritual treasures in Shu Mountain and the Legend of the Sword and Fairy. In the half-city shop, how come they are all standing here? Unbound King was a young man with shoulder-length white hair. He looked to be about 18 years old. Behind him was a purple-clothed old man, the reincarnation king of Half City. The reincarnation king had originally been scheming against the internet cafe, but the old man was smart enough to stop his plans after the big demon was suppressed. Now, he came into the internet cafe every day to play games. Upon entering the shop, they saw elders and disciples of the Nano faction standing around the counter. Mozian said, "The shop released a new movie today, and we're deciding if we should watch it together." Yuyan wondered, "The Matrix?" After watching it, can we dump Lester and hack into the security system ourselves to do all kinds of tasks? Lu Ningyan asked. "Ms. Ruan, do you guys plan to watch it?" "I will if the guild president watches it," Ruan Ning said. "This old demon never misses a good thing," Mozian said in disdain. "It's a good thing for him if we watch it since he can make money from us," the Zuchi spiritual master said. "Is it about hackers?" "Let's get online first and ask the cultivators in Xuanhuan City in the group chat," Mozian replied. "I have a feeling that it's no good." After staying in the world of Grand Theft Auto 5 for a while, they found that this world had nothing good except for some excellent spiritual artifacts. Even though those machines and tools were good, the top-level cultivators could still deal with these heavy machines as long as they understood their mechanisms and the principles behind them. Unbound King and Reincarnation King exchanged a look. "What's this thing? Should we watch it?" Usually Mr. Fang's group tour in QQ was quiet, but whenever a new movie was released, many people would jump out and flood the chat with messages. Su Tianji, "Sir, are you going to organize a group tour today?" Nailin Hongwu, "This doesn't look like a movie for warriors. Should I watch it?" Mr. Fang, "It's your decision. It only lasts a bit over 2 hours. Get on board if you want to watch it." Su Tianji, "Me Dong Kingli, me Unhui, count me in." Messages flooded the group chat in QQ. In the Half City shop, Mozian urged, "Let's go now. Hurry up and get on board." Lu Ningyan was nonplussed. "Senior sister, didn't you say that it wouldn't be good?" Mozian replied, "Don't you see that they've all gone? If we don't hurry, there won't be seats available." Yuyan shouted, "Hurry, hurry!" In the Yuanyang shop, "What are they doing? So many people. Shall we go and watch it too?" Tang Yu said, "What's happening? Let's go and have a look." Instantly, a large group of people showed up in Mr. Fang's QZONE. "Didn't you say that you wouldn't watch it? How come you're all here?" Fang Qi glanced around and saw the old man Gu Tingyan and Elder Yu, wondering how they got into this group. While his face twitched, Mr. Fang said, "The tour bus is full. Please wait for the next bus." The customers who hadn't gotten onto the tour bus were silent for a while. Then, Black Demon asked, "Anyone wants to get on board my tour bus of the Matrix?" "Me. Count me in." Nearby, the Reincarnation King and Unbound King had just gotten online. "How come they all went to watch the movie? Shall we watch it too?" With a clank, the access to Mr. Fang's QZONE was closed, and Mr. Fang's tour bus set off. It was pitch black. When the light came, they saw dense rows of data flowing on the pitch-black screen in a complicated manner. Fortunately, the system had the translation function, which enabled the audience to see that it was online communication between two hackers. "It looks powerful," Wang Zi whispered. "I wonder if it's better than The Legend of the Sword and Fairy 3, Tang Yu whispered since he knew only one game. The environment around them looked modern, and the buildings were in the style of the end of the 20th century. In a dim and crude room, a female hacker sat inside while police officers swarmed up to the door. "Senior sister, these guys are so weirdly dressed," Mu King whispered. Both of them had come to watch the movie with Jiang Ziyu. The cultivators of the Yuanyang City shop didn't know what they were watching except that it was similar to the opening animation of The Legend of the Sword and Fairy 3, so they watched for fun. Having played Grand Theft Auto 5, Mozian and the others were familiar with this concept. She said with some disdain, "What good is this? Catching a hacker? It would be more fun to drive a car and lead them on a wild chase." The others were also a bit disappointed. For them, modern society was full of people with low-level strengths. After all, the Wui Taoist Alliance had mastered the creation of items such as guns, and it seemed meaningless to watch a movie with a similar theme. It wasn't exactly meaningless. It was just that its theme overlapped with that of Grand Theft Auto 5. The cultivators of Yuanyang City also felt that the spiritual artifacts and martial art techniques shown in this move were child's play. "This is not nearly as good as The Legend of the Sword and Fairy 3, Zhongwu said. "Senior Gu, what do you think?" Gu Tingyan nodded. "Indeed, it doesn't seem as good." Elder Yu said, "I can deal with 100 or 1,000 people who are on this strength level. They are indeed lame. Is it a mistake that we came to watch it?"
Chapter 457, The weird world in the movie. The beginning of the movie was indeed a bit boring if one came to watch the movie expecting to learn something. The fighting scenes were lame in the eyes of warriors and cultivators, even though the heroine showed strength much greater than ordinary people. If one watched it as an ordinary movie, the chase part was in fact quite thrilling. After all, not every movie or game would begin with a great battle between an immortal and a demon, as in The Legend of the Sword and Fairy 3. At this moment, the camera turned to a telephone booth by the road. Meanwhile, the agents were crashing toward it while driving a big truck. This thing looks to be in the same category as the shop owner's race car. Curious, Tang Yu walked up and stared at the truck. Boom! As a loud noise sounded, it seemed like the telephone booth was shattered with the heroine in it. The headlights of the truck shone on the shattered telephone booth. She's not in there? At this moment, the dozens of viewers stood on the opposite side of the street with Mr. Fang, staring at the destroyed telephone booth. There wasn't a trace of the woman. It looked as if the truck had crashed into a ghost. Boss, are you sure this isn't Silent Hill? Li Xiangxiu moved closer to Mr. Fang subconsciously. A big white deer raced to her. Princess, your highness, there is a monster. Then, a smirking face emoji floated over. Strange. How come a little demon dares to venture out? 3 agents got out from the truck. Agent Smith seemed to have anticipated this situation. She got off! ! All the people froze. How did she do it? Even hackers have to follow the basic laws of nature when escaping, right? Did she flee through the internet cable? Master Gatinian looked grim. I can't tell how she left. Puzzled. The audience continued watching. There are such people in this world? Wang Xi watched the scenes dubiously. Brother Wang, where do you think this place is? While wearing crude clothes, Tang Yu had a black folding fan painted with golden bamboo leaves. He had bought it after growing vegetables for several days, and the fan looked quite fancy with its top-grade material. As for clothes, he had run out of money. The story of The Legend of the Sword and Fairy 3 was set in the immortal world and mortal world, and the viewers were familiar about it. However, the clothes and weapons in this movie were quite novel for them. When the customers of the Xuanhuan city shop glanced at the customers from other shops, they found that one wore Kyokuzunagi's costume, one wore a sorcerer's cloak, and one wore a Taoist robe from an unknown faction. In fact, there was even a smirking face emoji floating in the air. There were all kinds of people wearing all kinds of clothes. For the customers of the Xuanhuan city shop, most of them had never seen the style of living shown in the movie. It seemed to be a totally different civilization from theirs. As the camera turned, they arrived at Neo's home. Neo was the main character. The following scene was even odder. When Neo woke up, the computer blacked out and then showed the words, "Wake up Neo, the Matrix has you." Follow the White Rabbit. 3 strange, choppy, and puzzling messages appeared. As the story went on, things got even weirder. At first, the hacker Morpheus directed Neo through the phone to escape from the chasing agents in the big office. Morpheus even knew the exact moment when the agents had their backs to Neo. Easily, he helped Neo dodge the agents and get out of the office. He was just beside the agents, but the latter couldn't see him because he was in their blind spot. So they didn't discover everything. All of this was because someone directed his moves from a distance. Some people in the audience had played Grand Theft Auto 5, and they did the Fleeca bank job. They felt like this scene was like when Lester used his own little software to avoid the bank's defense software and hacked into its security system. The audience watched while Neo failed in his escape and was apprehended by the agents. Having watched some modern movies and games, the audience from the Jewel City and the Half City expected that Neo would be interrogated by the agents. Neo even gave the agents the finger and said that he would call a lawyer. Without a word, the agent glued Neo's lips, making him into a mouthless man. Meanwhile, a strange electronic device turned into an electronic worm and entered Neo's belly! The audience felt weirder, and their expressions became strange. Even the people who knew the meaning of the word hacker began to realize this wasn't a movie about ordinary hackers. This world looks like that in Grand Theft Auto 5, but they are not the same. right? Lee Haran said in surprise. The technology shown in Resident Evil and Grand Theft Auto 5 was not complicated, and it was not difficult for them to understand and master. While watching the movie, Song King-fing said in a low voice, "If the police in GTA 5 are as powerful as the agents in this movie, we wouldn't be able to do any jobs." Wang Xi said, "They seem to know things that we don't." Tang Yu said in a low voice, "The cars driven in the movie have the same mechanisms as the shop owner's race car." He might have gotten the technology from these people in the movie. The people from Xuanhuan City whispered among themselves. "Look, they found Morpheus." Morpheus was a tall bald guy wearing a black leather coat and sunglasses. He was the leader of the hackers and the person who had helped Neo. The audience felt that he might explain all the mysteries that they had witnessed. What the heck is going on? Sutanji watched in bafflement as the two people talked. "It looks like the world in Grand Theft Auto 5, but it's much weirder." "I have the same feeling," Dong Qinglai said. "Each time when something happens, he would wake up in his bed, but the things he dreams about are real, even the electronic worm is." Nalan Hongwu said, "In my opinion, there's a mastermind behind all this." And Huai said with a nod, "It must be the so-called Matrix." They stood there and continued watching. While they talked, Neo swallowed the red pill. Morpheus and others helped him attach all kinds of devices to his body. It seemed like the truth would come out in the next moment. Chapter 458, The Real World. In the movie, Morpheus, who was clothed in black and wearing a pair of sunglasses, said, "The pill you took is part of a trace program. It's designed to disrupt your input and output carrier signals, so we can pinpoint your location." Thunderbolts flashed in the storm outside. While a rumbling thunder rolling outside the window, Neo began to transform. "What's happening?" Moxian stared at Neo intently. Wang Xi watched the scene curiously. Other disciples from the Heavenly Academy also stared at Neo intently while his body was engulfed by liquid metallic material. "What will happen?" Bei, Li Lan Yuo, and the other girls all stared at the scene. "Is this a fantasy realm?" Demonic woman Ning Bai guessed uneasily. "Impossible. Everything is real here." Everyone stared at Neo without blinking, not wanting to miss any detail. The movie continued. "It's going into replication. Tank, we're going to need a signal soon." Located. Targeting. Almost there. A series of electronic beeping sounds came. "He's going into arrest. Lock. I got him." Among horrified exclamations, a high-tech tank filled with red liquid appeared. In it was a man who had tubes attached to his spine, the back of his head, and other places on his body. Looking out from the water tank, the man saw rows and rows of neatly placed high-tech tanks. He turned to look forward and saw two huge pillars reaching up into the sky. On the pillars were densely placed high-tech tanks that looked like warm eggs. Looking down, he saw a bottomless abyss with many jumping electrical currents. Looking up, he saw a seemingly limitless number of pillars with high-tech tanks on them, and his high-tech tank was one of the many. What are these?" Seeing this scene, even the grand cultivators such as Zongwu in Xuanhuan City were shocked. More importantly, they should be in the room with Morpheus and the other hackers, right? Could it be that it really was just a dream? What are these cocoon-like high-tech tanks? The big white deer's legs turned to jelly, and it dropped to the ground with tears. So scary. Some cultivators from Xuanhuan City stepped back subconsciously. "Sir, what the heck are these things?" Sutanji also looked alarmed. "Isn't it supposed to be a world like that in Grand Theft Auto 5? How come it suddenly changed into this world?" Her two disciples hugged each other and shrieked in fear. Even the fearless demon woman was surprised, and her expression changed. "Is this the truth?" Even Nalan Hongwu looked astonished. "Master, what is this?" Wang Xi backed off subconsciously while glancing at Gatinian beside him. Humans' fear came from the unknown. However, sometimes the truth was even more horrifying than the unknown. Only the non-human creatures in here could be compared to Gatinian's age and experience, and his cultivation strength was almost unrivaled. However, At this moment, his old face had changed color as well. What are these damn things? I don't like this feeling. The big demon floated back to the middle of the crowd from the foremost position. Then, all the tubes were removed from Neo's body, and he slid down from the high-tech tank before being picked up. Welcome to the real world. In the aircraft, Morpheus and the others wore crude sweaters, looking like refugees from a disaster. He looked totally different from his previous image, where he wore a pair of sunglasses and a black coat. Inside the aircraft were antique-looking machines. The audience glanced around the real world and watched the people in the aircraft help Neo recover his bodily functions. The audience looked alarmed and shocked when they saw the plug holes all over Neo's body. They felt fearful about the unknown and dreaded the truth at the same time. They had vague yet strong anticipation, waiting for the people in the movie to explain the scenes they had seen. What is truth? What is real? They watched the recovered Neo enter the previous world again. With a tube connecting the plug in the back of his head, he relaxed and then found that he was suddenly inside a pure white world. A virtual reality world. Right now we're inside a computer program. Exclamation mark. Is it really so hard to believe? In the movie, Morpheus explained, what is real? How do you define real? If you're talking about what you can feel, what you can smell, what you can taste and see, then real is simply electrical signals interpreted by your brain. This is the world that you know. All the cultivators watched their conversation dumbfoundedly. Is this the so-called real? Is it just signals interpreted by the body? It was ridiculously simple. But no one could laugh at this moment. I'm surprised that it's so easy to turn fantasy into reality. The virtual reality world in the movie was horrifying to them. The so-called signals could completely keep people's awareness in the virtual reality world. Perhaps in their eyes, a human body was no different from an advanced and complicated spiritual artifact. The conversation between the two continued. This is the world as it was at the end of the 20th century. Morpheus turned on the TV which showed the scenes of their former world. It exists now only as part of a neural interactive simulation that we call the Matrix. We have only bits and pieces of information, but what we know for certain is that at some point in the early 21st century, all of mankind was united in celebration. We marveled at our own magnificence as we gave birth to AI, a singular consciousness that spawned an entire race of machines. AI? Many cultivators from Xuanhuan City looked puzzled. AI? Artificial intelligence? Some people saw such a thing in Resident Evil. Red Queen? What's that? Zhongwu asked curiously. What is artificial intelligence? Obviously, the customers in the new shop couldn't understand this term. However, the customers from the old shops were different since they had encountered this world in the movie Resident Evil and the game Grand Theft Auto 5. People who don't understand AI can go and watch the movie Resident Evil, Lanmo said. It is an intelligence created by humans. It is something like artifact spirits. The calculation ability beyond humans' imagination and the intelligence controlling everything like a shadow were still nightmarish for many players of Resident Evil.
Chapter 459, almost swayed my faith in Tao. We don't know who struck first, us or them. In the movie, Morpheus continued to explain, but we know that it was us that scorched the sky. At the time they were dependent on solar power and it was believed that they would be unable to survive without an energy source as abundant as the sun. Throughout human history, we have been dependent on machines to survive. Fate, it seems, is not without a sense of irony. The human body generates more bioelectricity than a 120-volt battery and over 25,000 BTUs of body heat. Combined with a form of fusion, the machines have found all the energy they would ever need. There are fields, endless fields, where human beings are no longer born. We are grown. From the TV in the scene, everyone saw a large field that seemed to be used for farming, and there were huge octopus-like machines that were growing babies in red containers as if they were growing in wombs. This was the horrifying and accurate production process of humans by the machines. This was the truth that the audience had been looking for. This was the bioenergy that the machines invented. The movie presented to the audience endless machine fields and mountain-like human growing machines that had intelligence. These scenes swept over the mind of the audience like surging waves in a tsunami. The truth was so horrifying. Some people had remained calm before this scene, but now even the Grandmasters with extremely high cultivation strengths looked scared and twisted. Soon, a group of girls shrieked in fear. Perhaps nothing in the world was more shocking than these scenes for them. Fortunately, they watched it on the TV, and they were separated from the scenes by the TV screen. Despite this, the big white deer still dropped to the ground, covering its eyes with hooves. Occasionally, it peeked from between its hooves, looking curious and scared at the same time. "Does it mean," Tang Yu said in shock, "they put intelligence into the machines that they made, and then they were enslaved by these machines? The machines created a virtual reality world to enslave humans?" It was like the cultivators giving their spiritual artifacts intelligence, and the latter enslaved the cultivators. However, these spiritual artifacts were much more advanced than their spiritual treasures born with spirituality. The intelligence that they possessed was so horrifying that they could create a whole virtual reality world. In other words, the humans used the knowledge named technology to create a god. Even if it wasn't a god, it was a demigod. At this moment, this movie had brought them a totally different sensation. Some people such as Mo Xian were even worried if they were living in a virtual reality world but were sleeping in high-tech tanks in reality as the people shown in the movie. Of course, this wasn't possible. What will happen then? The people who had followed the trend to watch the movie and weren't that interested were now completely enthralled by it. It wasn't just novel. It was beyond that. It ventured into the conversation of humanity and worldviews. It was just a story. Even if it were just a story, it showed them a perspective that they had never heard or imagined before. Even if they couldn't obtain any benefits from this costly movie, they would all continue watching it at this point. "It is superb," many people exclaimed silently. "It is amazing." At this moment, most people hadn't recovered from the shock that the previous scenes gave them. When the characters came to the real world, the plot began to settle down a bit. Gradually, some weird ideas started to grow in their minds. The people in the movie live in a virtual reality world and thought that it is the real world. What about us? What about our world? These thoughts washed over their minds. They felt as if their whole worldviews were about to collapse. Will we one day find ourselves lying in such things? Mo Xian asked fearfully. Bedlam broke out after she said that. The people around her began to talk animatedly among themselves. "We have lived many years and take the reincarnations and immortal ascendants as laws of nature that have existed as long as time itself. If one day, all these prove to be lies, what if our physical bodies are stored at some unknown places while our minds lived in a virtual reality world, just as Neo did?" Only thinking about it sent chills down their spines and scared them. After all, they didn't know anything. They were living in the mortal world. No one could say that it was impossible. At these thoughts, some cultivators felt weak in their legs. What if they found that they had been living in a dream after cultivating for hundreds of years? "Master, pinch me so that I will know if I'm dreaming." Feng He and Weixin looked fearful. "Pooh, if it's really a dream, it's no use pinching you," Su Tianji said morosely. "How come you turn into humans in the dream while I am a deer? It's not fair." A big white deer yelled its complaint. Obviously, its concerns seemed to be different from the others. This Mo Xian." Mr. Fang put his hand on his forehead. "Stay strong and don't get swayed by external things." Gu Tingyan inhaled deeply, even though he had been doubtful for 1 second as well. However, as a Grandmaster, his mind and fortitude were much stronger than these small and weak cultivators. "Let's continue with the movie," Nalan Hongwa said. "Obviously, their world is different from ours. Don't dwell on the impossible, little girls. It's just a movie, right?" Song King Feng snapped back to his senses. "I wish that I could one day wake up as Li Xiao." After all, the legend of the Sword and Fairy one began with a dream. Despite his casual words, he was still a bit doubtful and spooked out. "Right." Su Tianji rolled her eyes at Mr. Fang. "It almost swayed my faith in Tao." Mr. Fang didn't know what to say for a second. "It's not my fault that you know so little about the world." People instinctively avoided harm and pursued benefits. Although some people might get a horrifying idea at some point, they would discard it as a story if they didn't want it to be true. Besides, this was only a story, a movie, wasn't it? However, this movie still shocked the viewers so much that they began to doubt the truth of their lives. As for the young people, they didn't dare to dwell on this thought. It was natural to think about the origin of the world and life, but the story depicted in the movie was scary. Perhaps many people were comforting themselves that it was just a movie. Although this movie spawned doubt in their minds about life itself, they were still avidly curious to see what would happen next in the story. Chapter 460, dumb or not. As time went on, the audience began to understand the storyline of the movie. When the Matrix was born, there was a person, a hacker, who could change the Matrix at his will. In Zion, the last human city, there were a few people who had been born in the Matrix, and they were all released by this hacker. After his death, the Oracle prophesied that he would return and lead humans out of the Matrix to regain freedom. The following plot was simple. Neo recovered his strength and got familiar with the programs in the Matrix while strengthening himself with it being the foundation. Obviously, the rules in the Matrix were different from those in the real world. The agents could borrow any human body in the Matrix and take full use of the rules in the Matrix. In the Matrix, they were godlike existences, unkillable, able to change into anybody, could bend rules and control time. They could do anything unimaginable to humans. Humans entering the Matrix would die if they encountered the agents. Obviously, it was difficult to free humankind. However, they must enter the Matrix to save their minds first, since only rescuing the physical bodies was a meaningless job, as the bodies were like corpses without consciousness. By now, the audience began to have a general idea of the worldview expressed in the movie. For the cultivators and warriors, the humans in this movie had gone off track with their technological advancements. These humans put all their strength and energy into developing spiritual artifacts instead of improving their own bodies. In the world shown in the movie, the humans created many spiritual artifacts with extremely high intelligence, which eventually sent humans themselves into hell. Now, this was the hacker's path to redemption. This wasn't an ordinary movie discussing hackers. It was about the humans' revolution at the end of the world. The technology level in the movie was too high for the cultivators to reach with their current research level, but it didn't stop them from understanding the system. For most of them, they just watched it as an ordinary movie, since not all of them studied spiritual artifacts. However, this movie shocked them more than anything else, and they watched from different lenses. The world shown in the movie was eye-opening. Although the viewers knew that anything could happen in the world, this story still went beyond everyone's imagination. Most of them watched the movie with wide open eyes and mouths from the beginning to the end. By now, the people in the movie believed that they had found the one. They believed that it was time to fight back. Obviously, this attack was a total failure. Perhaps it would have been fine if no accidents happened. To their surprise, they had a traitor among them. The traitor was a person who was tired of struggling in fear each day in the end of the world. This person wanted to return to the Matrix as an ignorant ordinary person. After all, ignorance was a blessing. Meanwhile, it seemed that Neo wasn't the one, at least not yet. Maybe he had the potential to become the one, but he was far from that right now. The Matrix changed the program and trapped everyone inside. Death in the Matrix meant death in the real world, and many people died in this battle. Except for Neo and the heroine, no one escaped from the Matrix. Even their leader, Morpheus, was trapped inside while he tried to slow down the agents. This system version of the movie was different from the original version. In the original version, people would instantly die if they were unplugged when their awareness was still inside the Matrix. However, in the system version, the people's awareness would slowly disappear in the Matrix while their physical bodies would suffer brain death. Seeing the traitor unplug several people and causing them brain death, Mozian and other faint-hearted girls were scared. Immediately, they put down their virtual reality headset and found that they could still go back. Then, they reconnected again. Then, they disconnected and connected again and again several times. As a result, some girls beside Mr. Fang kept disappearing and appearing. Everyone gaped at what they were doing, and they were speechless. Mr. Fang was exasperated. Damn it! Are you dumb or not? Does it mean that my feeling of realness in this world is the result of a similar virtual reality technology? While watching the movie, Lee Heron appraised his senses. Impossible. The Zuchi spiritual master said, "My vital soul can leave my body already, and the false feelings of the physical body can't fool me." Even if she were trapped inside a fantasy array, she still couldn't tell the subtle difference between the real and the fake. Just like when Wuzong was trapped in the fantasy array in a celestial relic, he also knew that he was inside a fantasy array. Even Neo, who is the one, can't distinguish the difference, right? I'm afraid that it isn't only a reaction of the physical body. However, after awakening, Neo never doubted that the world inside the Matrix was fake, and he still had a subtle feeling of dreaming even though he was clearly awake. When they watched the great battle between Fei Peng and Chong Lu, Everyone including Gu Tianyan, who had much more life experience and higher cultivation strength, had thought it was real. They didn't see that it was fake and virtual reality. What was more was that the higher level cultivators could leave a trace of their awareness in the real world to keep watching the surroundings while playing the game. It felt the same as when they released a streak of their vital soul into a mystic realm to explore while their physical bodies remained outside. Virtual reality is supposed to be like this, Lan Mo speculated, but the things in the shop must be different. If it is the same thing as in the movie, we would have died many times. In the virtual reality world in the Matrix, the death of awareness meant the death of the physical body. If the games in the shop had the same mechanism as the movie, the people here would have died dozens or hundreds of times by now. After all, each of them had died many times in the games. The people instantly fell silent. Watch the movie. Continue watching the movie. They immediately changed the topic. At this moment, all of them had witnessed the horrifying abilities of the agents who could change from any people in this world and possessed unimaginable strength. No attacks were effective on them. Even Morpheus, the hacker who had elevated his abilities beyond the limit of ordinary people in this digital world, could do nothing to the agent in front of them named Smith. How can he be so strong? Song Qingfeng exclaimed in astonishment. He feels nothing just standing there while taking the beating. There wasn't even a scratch on his skin. After accepting everything, when they reached and comprehended the horrifying truth, they felt a thrill and enjoyment as they watched the movie. The combat style of the hackers in the movie went beyond the imagination of the audience.